Hello. It's time for Little Men. And I thought I have the bookmark here, but I may be reading, either skipping a little bit or reading back over a little bit, but hopefully we'll get the gist. Let's see. You know, the girls had given a party, and then the boys had done, what, a play or something, or were going to, or they were fighting. I can't even remember myself. Unrepentant bangs. Hang on just a second. Okay, I'll probably reading over some stuff I've already read, but that's okay. The ill-mannered young gentleman hastily retired. Oh, they got in a fight at the little thing she had. Hastily retired to be received outside with derision and scorn by the unrepentant Bangs, who would not associate with them for at least 15 minutes. Daisy was soon consoled for the failure of her ball, but lamented the edict that parted her from her brother and mourned over his shortcomings in her tender little heart. Nan rather enjoyed the trouble and went about turning up her pug nose at the three, especially Tommy, who pretended not to care and loudly proclaimed his satisfaction at being rid of those stupid girls. But in his secret soul, he soon repented of the rash act that caused this banishment from the society he loved, and every hour of separation taught him the value of the stupid girls. The others gave in very soon and longed to be friends, for now there was no Daisy to pet and cook for them, no Nan to amuse and doctor them, and worst of all, no Mrs. Joe to make home life pleasant and life easy for them. To their great affliction, Mrs. Joe seemed to consider herself one of the offended girls, for she hardly spoke to the outcast, looked as if she did not see them when she passed, and was always too busy now to attend to their request. This sudden and entire exile from favor cast a gloom over their souls, for when Mother Bear deserted them, their sun had set at noonday, as it were, and they had no refuge left. This unnatural state of things actually lasted for 3 days. Then they could bear it no longer, and fearing that the eclipse night become total, went to Mr. Bear for help and counsel. It's my private opinion that he had received instructions how to behave if the case should be laid before him, but no one suspected it, and he gave the afflicted boys some advice, which they greatly accepted and carried out in the following manner. Secluding themselves in the garret, they devoted several play hours to the manufacture of some mysterious machine, which took so much pace that Asia grumbled, and the little girls wondered mightily. Nan nearly got her inquisitive nose pinched in the door trying to see what was going on, and Daisy set about openly lamenting that they could not all play nicely together and not have any dreadful secrets. Can you hear my mouth is so dry? Should have brought my drink in here. Wednesday afternoon was fine, and after a good deal of consultation about wind and weather, Nat and Tommy went off bearing an immense flat parcel hidden under many newspapers. Nan nearly died with suppressed curiosity. Daisy nearly cried with vexation, and both quite trembled with interest when Demi marched into Mrs. Bear's room, hat in hand, and said in the politest tone possible to a mortal boy of his years, "Please, Aunt Joe, would you and the girls come out to a surprise party we have made for you? Do, it's a very nice one." "Thank you, we will come with pleasure, only I must take Teddy with me," replied Mrs. Bear with a smile that cheered Demi like sunshine after rain. "Well, we'd like to have him. The little wagon's all ready for the girls, and you won't mind walking just up to Pennyroyal Hill, will you, Auntie? I should like it exceedingly, but are you quite sure I shall not be in the way? Oh, no, indeed, we want you very much, and the party will be spoilt if you don't come, cried Denny with great earnestness. Well, thank you kindly, sir, and Aunt Jo made him a great curtsy, for she liked frolics as well as any of them. Now, young ladies, we must not keep them waiting. On with the hats, and let us be off at once. I'm all impatience to know what the surprise is. As Mrs. Bear spoke, everyone bustled about, and in 5 minutes the 3 little girls and Teddy were packed into the clothes basket, as they called the wicker wagon, which Toby drew. Demi walked at the head of the procession, and Mrs. Jo brought up the rear, escorted by Kit. It was a most imposing party, I assure you, for Toby had a red feather duster in his head. 2 remarkable flags waved over the carriage. Kit had a blue bow on his neck, which nearly drove him wild. Demi wore a nosegay of dandelions in his buttonhole, and Mrs. Jo carried the queer Japanese umbrella in honor of the occasion. The girls had little flutters of excitement all the way, and Teddy was so charmed with the drive, he kept dropping his hat overboard. And when it was taken from him, he prepared to tumble out himself, evidently feeling that it behooved him to do something for the amusement of the party. When they came up to the hill, nothing was to be seen but the grass blowing in the wind, as the fairy books say, and the children looked disappointed. But Demi said, in his most impressive manner, "Now, you all get out and stand still, and the surprise party will come in," with which remark he retired behind a rock, over which heads had been bobbing at intervals for the last half hour. A short pause of intense suspense, and then Nat, Demi, and Tommy marched forth, each bearing a new kite, which they presented to the 3 young ladies. Shrieks of delight arose, but were silenced by the boys, who said with faces brimful of merriment, "That isn't all the surprise," and running behind the rock again emerged bearing a 4th kite of superb size, on which was printed in bright yellow letters, "For Mother Bear." "We thought you'd like one too, because you were angry with us and took the girls' part," cried all 3, shaking with laughter, for this part of the affair evidently was a surprise to Mrs. Jo. She clapped her hands and joined in the laugh, looking thoroughly tickled at the joke. "Now, boys, that is regularly splendid. Who did think of it?" she asked, receiving the monster kite with as much pleasure as the little girls did. "Uncle Fritz proposed it when we planned to make the others. He said you'd like it, so we made a bouncer," answered Demi, beaming with satisfaction at the success of the plot. "Uncle Fritz knows what you like." Yes, these are magnificent kites, and we were wishing we had some the other day when you were flying yours, weren't we, girls?" "That's why we made them for you," cried Tommy, standing on his head as the most appropriate way of expressing his emotions. "Well, let us fly them," said energetic Nan. "I don't know how," began Daisy. "We'll show you. We want to," cried all the boys in a burst of devotion, as Demi took Daisy's, Tommy Nan's, and Nat with difficulty persuaded Bess to let go her little blue one. "Auntie, if you'll wait a minute, we'll pitch yours for you," said Demi, feeling that Mrs. Bear's favor must not be lost again by any neglect of theirs. "Bless your buttons, dear, I know all about it, and here is a boy who will toss up for me," added Mrs. Jo, as the professor peeped over the rock with a face full of fun. He came out at once and tossed up the big kite, and Mrs. Jo ran off with it in fine style, while the children stood and enjoyed the spectacle. One by one, all the kites went up and floated far overhead like gay birds, balancing themselves on the fresh breeze that blew steadily over the hill. Such a merry time as they had, running and shouting, sending up the kites, or pulling them down, watching their antics in the air, and feeling them tug at the string like creatures trying to escape. Nan was quite wild with the fun. Daisy thought the new play nearly as interesting as Dawes, and little Bess was so fond of her new kite, that she only let it go on very short flights, preferring to hold it on her lap and look at the remarkable pictures painted on it by Tommy's dashing brush. Mrs. Joe enjoyed hers immensely, and it acted as if it knew who owned it, for it came tumbling down, head first when least expected, caught on trees, nearly pitched into the river, and finally darted away to such a height that it looked a mere speck among the clouds. By and by, everyone got tired, and fastening the kite strings to trees and fences, all sat down to rest except Mr. Bear, who went off to look at the cows, with Teddy on his shoulder. "Did you ever have such a good time as this before?" asked Nat, as they lay about on the grass nibbling pennyroyal like a flock of sheep. "Not since I last flew a kite years ago when I was a girl," answered Mrs. Joe. "I'd like to have known you when you were a girl. You must have been so jolly," said Nat. "I was a naughty little girl, I'm sorry to say." "I like naughty little girls," observed Tommy, looking at Nan, who made a frightful grimace at him in return for the compliment. "Why don't I remember you then, Auntie? Was I too young?" asked Demi. "Rather, dear. I suppose my memory hadn't come then. Grandpa says that different parts of the mind unfold as we grow up, and the memory part of my mind hadn't unfolded when you were little, so I can't remember how you look," explained Demi. And of course, he wasn't born yet. "Now, little Socrates, you'd better keep that question for Grandpa. It is beyond me," said Aunt Joe, putting on the extinguisher. "Well, I will. He knows about these things, and you don't," returned Demi, feeling that on the whole, kites were better adapted to the comprehension of the present company. "Tell about the last time you flew a kite," said Nat, for Mrs. Joe had laughed as she spoke of it, and he thought it might be interesting. "Oh, it was only rather funny, for I was a great girl of 15, and was ashamed to be seen at such play, so Uncle Teddy and I privately made our kites, and stole away to fly them. We had a capital time, and we were resting as we are now, when suddenly we heard voices, and saw a party of young ladies and gentlemen coming back from a picnic. Teddy did not mind, though, because he was rather a large boy to be playing with the kite, but I was in a great flurry, for I knew I should be sadly laughed at, and never hear the last of it, because my wild ways amused the neighbors as much as Nan's do us. "What shall I do?" I whispered to Teddy as the voices drew nearer. "I'll show you," he said, and whipping out his knife, he cut the strings. Away flew the kites, and when the people came up, we were picking flowers as properly as you please. They never suspected us, and we had a grand laugh over our narrow escape. "Were the kites lost, Annie?" asked Daisy. "Quite lost, but I didn't care, for I made up my mind that it would be best to wait till I was an old lady before I played with kites again." "And you see, I have waited," said Mrs. Joe, beginning to pull in the big kite, for it was getting late. "Must we go now?" "I must, or you won't have any supper, and that sort of surprise party would not suit you, I think, my chickens." "Hasn't our party been a nice one?" said Tommy complacently. "Splendid," answered everyone. "Do you know why? It is because your guests have behaved themselves and tried to make everything go well. You understand what I mean, don't you?" "Yes'm," was all the boys said. But they stole a shamefaced look at one another as they meekly shouldered their kites and walked home, thinking of another party where the guests had not behaved themselves and things had gone badly on account of it. And that's the end of chapter 9. And I'm going to stop there, and we'll be at 10 next time. And 10 is called Home Again. Home Again. Chapter 10, Home Again. Bye-bye. See you soon. Hope to see you this evening live at 5. Bye-bye. Love you. Be sweet. Don't be ugly.